Welcome back to the greatest Cold War podcast that's ever been recorded. You may not know that if I don't know if you're looking
You
at the
don't
official
listen.
charts, the official fake news charts, but this
Or
is
or the reviews.
all the reviews, yeah. But, aside from all of that,
Tr-
this
Trust
is,
us. Trust
everyone
us.
knows this is the
Yeah.
greatest
Yeah.
Cold War podcast ever.
Yeah.
This is episode 310, Ray. We're
Yeah.
still talking about the Cuban Revolution.
You might be, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Oh.
94-year-old Raul Castro finally getting it. The U.S. indictment against him. We're going to get that son of a bitch for what he did or did not do 30 years ago. Justice is slow, my friend. Sometimes justice is retarded, but it never gives.
Mm.
It never gives up.
Mm.
So I hope he didn't want to see
Unless
95. Right? Go ahead. Your
Unless
turn.
the kind of justice for the people that stormed the Capitol, because then you get a $1.8
You
billion
get
compensation
Look,
fund for
it's
the trouble that we put you through when you tried to overthrow the government.
it's
So sorry.
complicated. Okay?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
complicated. So
Or
you
you're
wouldn't
the
understand.
president and any member of his family that just got a
A blank,
lifetime
yes. You
blank
can
check. You never be
never be
prosecuted for anything.
investigated. Yeah, they wouldn't
Yeah.
even be investigated. The IRS and nope, hands off.
American justice is amazing.
At its finest. Anyway, you
Well, we're
should.
not talking about Cuba 2026. We're talking about Cuba 1959/1960.
Yeah, we are.
And the big question in 1959, Ray, as far as Cuba is concerned, is what kind of revolution this was going to turn out to be.
Yeah.
Was it going to
Absolutely.
be an extreme capitalist revolution? Was it going to be an extreme communist revolution? Or was it going to be something else? And of course, it's important to understand the revolution didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened at what was perhaps the height of the Cold War. If it had happened at a different moment in global history, it might have played out differently. But they were stuck with being in the Cold War at one of the hottest junctures of the Cold War.
Yeah.
So, you find yourself split between two hostile camps, one led by the Soviet Union, one led by the United States. They're both demanding that you pick a side.
And they can both annihilate you.
That's true.
Yeah. Can I add
So-
something? Add something to that real quick because
Yes.
we've said a billion times on this series already. Castro has said a billion times on this series already. Look, we didn't know what we were doing. We were young, dumb. Our hearts were pure, but our brains not so much. So now that the fact that he's what is he prime minister or no, he's prime minister. He's actually running the day-to-day shots. So the people are looking at him and going, you know what? Finally, we're going to get the real deal. We're going to get the kind of revolution that Castro wanted, and we support him. Well, that's nice, but he's like, now, decades later, he says, we know what we were doing. So he'll know it when he sees it, and he knows some of the thing he wants to do, but he's not sure of exactly how to proceed. And then all the things you just said, you've got the Americans, you've got the Soviets fucking staring right at him as he's trying to make very important decisions that's going to affect all these lives. But if he fucks up, he could lose everything, including his life.
And the outcome of the Cold War in 1959 was
yeah.
anybody's guess. Nobody
Toss up.
knew what was going to happen. I mean, when you and I were growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was still anybody's guess. We thought the whole world was going to end in some sort of a nuclear war.
Right.
But in 1959, the Soviet Union seemed to be doing well on some metrics, and the United States was actually on the defensive. We have to remember that in 1956, the new Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, who had emerged as Stalin's successor, Stalin died in 1953. There was like a few years when they were trying to figure out who's going to rule the roost. It ended up being Khrushchev.
Yeah.
He had promised to bury the capitalist states of the West. Those were his words.
Damn.
And 1957, he upstaged the United States by launching the world's first satellite into space. And then in 1960, they shot down an American spy plane. And then you had conflicts rolling out across the former British colonies in Africa and Asia. They gained political independence after the collapse of the British Empire. They were looking for new allies in what was increasingly looking like a bipolar world. You went from a world pre-World War One and Two, where you had lots of economic blocks still in existence from the great days of, the big trading firms, they'd slowly been dismantled by the first two world wars. Ottoman Empire dismantled after World War One, British Empire, French Empire being dismantled after World War Two. France is trying to cling on to Indochina.
Right.
They cling on to that for, sort of a couple of decades. England's realised that it can't afford its empire, so it's slowly giving them up, but really trying to walk away, but put friendly puppet governments in place that will remain loyal members of the Commonwealth and keep things running along the way that they were running. But they're having to give up all of these places slowly, except Hong Kong,
right,
which they held on to for another 50 years. But, these countries around the world are trying to pick a side. Everyone has to pick a side.
Right. Do they? Because here's Castro going, do we have to? Because not unlike a Jedi, he's like, I see a middle path. And that middle path, don't ask me to define it, but it's the revolution. It's something between communism and capitalism. Don't hate me, but I'm trying to ride the fence. And we all know how that really works out. History shows us that fence riders normally have a jolly old time and everybody's happy with their decisions. But he is trying because he's focused on the revolution. He's not focused on the fucking Cold War. I've got a revolution here to run. I've got my hands full as it is.
That's hot.
It is hot. Dangerously hot.
It's a bit like the way you tried to play it with D'Angelo and Heather for many long time. You're like, listen, we don't need to be. I don't need to be straight or bi. I can be somewhere in the middle. This doesn't need to be
exactly
a monogamous relationship. This can be something in between.
What I don't want to be is the receiver. If we could get that in writing, I would be so open. But hear me out. We're still in negotiations, but we should probably move back to the Cold War now.
Get your finger off that.
That's what she said.
More worried about his penis. Go ahead.
Yeah, the middle path, the middle way, like the middle path of Buddhism. I watched the other night what I believe was Anthony Bourdain's last episode that went to air, where he and Darren Aronofsky, one of my favorite directors, went to Bhutan, up sort of, kind of India, China, Tibet. And they practice Buddhism there, and they practice the middle path, and that's what Castro was trying to find, somewhere between. And this reminds me a lot of when we did the Vietnam episodes. Ho Chi Minh didn't want to pick a side either. Ho Chi Minh didn't want to pick a side. Fidel didn't want to pick a side. They both were like, listen, we don't need a side. We want to be friends with everyone. We need help.
Results.
We need help to rebuild our country.
Yes.
We will take the help from anyone. And they were told, no, pick a fucking side. You got to pick a side. We don't want to pick a side. You got to pick a side.
We won't help you until you pick a side. And then you're going to piss off 50% of the room either way. So good luck with that.
Yeah. So he was looking for the third way. He said in a lot of his speeches at the time, the only ism that could be attached to the Cuban Revolution was humanism.
Oh, that's sweet.
In New York, in April 1959, he said, liberty with bread, bread without terror, that is humanism.
That's pretty good. And
it's not bad.
Rare.
Particularly if it's my bread. Liberty with Cam sourdough. Cam sourdough without terror. That's what he should have said.
The best. Anyway.
But as much as he wanted to dodge the question, it couldn't really be dodged. There was too much political argy-bargy going on between the major superpowers that they wouldn't let you not pick a side. And particularly when one of these superpowers is 90 miles off the coast,
Right.
They're demanding allegiance or else. It's very, very tricky. And then there were airplanes piloted by Cuban exiles now living in Florida that would drop thousands of leaflets over Cuba at the time,
That's not bad.
urging them to fight communism.
Right.
They also were dropping bombs on shipping lanes and cane fields in the name of combating communism. So the Cubans were being forced to have this conversation by external forces, regardless of whether the Cubans wanted to pick a third way, a middle path or not.
Right.
They were being told that they were heading down a path of communism. That was the fear in the United States. You remember that when Castro met with Nixon, Nixon was concerned that the communists were going to take control, and he thought Castro didn't really know enough about communism.
Yeah.
The issue in Cuba was being brought up in church on Sunday. Pastors, preachers, priests from the
Pedophiles.
I was going to say from the
all of
professional pedophiles. I was going to say from the catapult, but I thought that's not the right word.
That's
from the
pulpit.
Yeah, whatever. Pulpit. The catapulpit. That's it.
The Catholic pulpit.
Shoots the priest out.
Right.
Shoots underage boys out to priests. They catch them.
Oh.
If you catch it, you get to keep it. That's
music festival. Yeah, it's like you're right. The communism, or what should the communism be? No, what should the Cuban Revolution be vis-a-vis communism was the topic du jour. And they were being forced to talk about it, but they're also obsessed. I think a lot of Cubans were like Castro. They were certainly had a healthy obsession or regard for politics. And so, yes, this is throughout the entire island. People are getting into arguments. There's fist fights right outside of church because someone looked at somebody wrong and said, "Communist." The other side, "No, fuck you, you're a communist." Whatever. The point is, it had permeated all segments of society. So Castro cannot.
A lot has
ignore
changed in
this.
the past 300 years.
That's
Sorry,
true.
I thought you'd finished.
No, I'm finished now.
A lot has changed in the past 300 years. People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We have eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy.
Yeah.
I have a need for speed, but that's different. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jean-Luc Picard.
For telling us what we aspire to be.
Yeah, Star Trek communism. That's what I've always wanted to see happen.
Make everything free, bitch, and you won't have world struggle.
Make it so, number one. So there was fighting in the church. There was fighting outside of the churches.
Yeah,
there was
baby.
arguments in classrooms and university halls. Even in Havana Central Park, they were having lots of arguments. They all considered themselves the real Cuban revolutionaries. Some were rejecting communism. Others were saying that Fidel's a communist. The people who hated the communists were calling the communists Moscow's lackeys. They would retort by calling the Catholics the Vatican's minions.
That's pretty good.
Some people were saying if Fidel's a communist, then sign me up. People were taking sides. They were being forced to take sides.
Yeah.
And as we know, in the Cuban government, their first ever president, Urrutia, had resigned 1959, and partly over the fact that Fidel was like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, you're making all the wrong decisions."
Right.
But then in October, and I want to drill down on this a little bit, a guy called Matos resigned his government post to protest what he saw as communist influence.
Right.
Now, Matos wasn't just anybody. He was a July 26th movement member. He was a senior comandante in the revolution, good friends with Che Guevara, good friends with Camilo Cienfuegos, good friends with Fidel. This guy had been with them and fought with them all the way through. And he was the governor of the largest province of Cuba at the time, Camagüey, and he resigned very publicly, and Fidel had him arrested as a traitor, and he then spent 20 years in prison.
God.
So,
Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, it gets pretty real pretty quickly. So this is 1959. The revolution is just started,
Yeah.
and one of the Fidel's inner circle gets thrown in jail for 20 years for causing trouble. So he, as I said, he was the military governor of Camagüey, up in the north of Cuba, largest province. And in that region, there were a lot of conservative farmers who weren't happy about the agrarian reforms that were being put into place because they were losing their land. They refused to give up their cattle. So army troops were sent in
Yeah.
to seize cattle from the farmers that resisted. And Matos wasn't happy about that. His constituents, I guess, his friends, the people that he was
Right.
living with, weren't happy about it. Now, it's interesting because you remember a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about the agrarian reform, I pointed out, I had quotes from Fidel and from Che,
Mm-hmm.
who were saying that the revolution was all about agrarian reform. Like if there was one thing that they said was, the whole reason for this was agrarian reform, and that during the revolution, before they beat Batista, before he left, and they were like taking control of the different places they captured in Sierra Maestra, they were implementing versions of agrarian reform. It was in their policy stuff. It was so. It's a bit confusing for me how Matos was part of that.
And then, absolutely.
Would have understood that, you would think. And then when they're actually trying to implement it as the governor of Cuba, he objects to the whole thing. Maybe they went faster than he had anticipated. And as we quoted Castro in a previous episode, even Castro said, we probably went too hard, too fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
we were too eager.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because if you think you're going to be on the winning side, maybe the rules, the laws don't apply to you. I don't know. I don't want to claim to know what this guy was thinking, but I do know that when he was arrested, before that, Castro said, on this night, one of you will betray me. And Uber said, is it me, Jesus? And Castro said, whatever. Whatever. So his ass was arrested. He did 20 years. No, but you make a very valid point. We're literally doing this in the places that we control, and suddenly you're shocked and protesting, embarrassing me when we do it for real. What the, the only thing I can conclude, like you, is they did it too fast. But still, you had to know this was issue number one. And if we didn't do it, people would have shot us in the street.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they wouldn't have shot him in the street. But as we've talked about, there was this understanding in Cuba that revolutions had been tried many times before, had failed. There's a lot of talk when they get into power, they just give in to the rich elite. And
it pays.
Castro was absolutely determined that wasn't going to happen this time, and that they were going to show the people that wasn't going to happen this time by moving quickly to implement the things that they said they were going to implement. Day one.
Day one, I'm going to introduce agrarian reform. No, but I mean, again, this is a bit much. I can't believe he did it publicly because he had to know that it would get, and not in a good way, the attention of Castro. Castro's not playing. Sorry.
Yeah, well, before that, when the first president, Urrutia, resigned, Matos went down to Havana and met with Castro on the 26th of July, like the big anniversary day, because they were having an anniversary, the first celebration of that.
Yes.
He met with him at the Hilton Hotel in Havana, where he tried to resign. And Castro apparently told him that resignation was unacceptable. He said, we still have too much work to do. He admitted that Raul and Che were flirting with Marxism, but he said the situation was under control. Forget about resigning. He said, but if in a while you still feel like you want to resign, then you have the right to resign. Now, apparently Matos then kept traveling to Havana to have secret meetings with other people that were disillusioned about the prospect of Cuba becoming communist.
Right.
Including, we know, this is historically backed up, future leaders of the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Right.
It's
starting to feel like a revolution within the revolution. That's
that's
the
look,
seeds of one. Sorry, go ahead.
and that's the way it always happens. Like I've talked about this before. When you study revolutions, you realize, and this goes right back to fucking Alexander the Great or Caesar episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you have a revolution, there are always going to be people with different ideas inside of the revolution who think their ideas are the right ideas, right? There's going to be a
Right.
range of views, all of which have validity. It's a bit like a revolutionary movement's a bit like a marriage or a family, right? You're going to have people with different thoughts or ideas or visions of how this should work, how it should play out.
The details.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, you pull together a coalition. You're seeing this in MAGA, right? In the US at the moment.
Yeah.
You've got all of these people that came together to support Trump and the MAGA thing in the last election. And now they're going, oh, hold on a second. And it's fracturing already because they don't agree with the Iran war or they don't agree with, I don't know, whatever the fuck they don't agree with. So this is true in Cuba. You had a whole bunch of guys that they all agreed that they wanted to get rid of Batista. They needed a revolution.
That's
But
easy.
they didn't necessarily agree on what it should look like afterwards. And as we know, during the revolution, Castro sort of had that same mantra that the guys that killed Caesar had, which is, look, let's just think about step one. We'll work out step two. Right now, I don't have time to think about step two. I'm too busy trying to think about step one. So let's just get step one done, get rid of Batista. Then your questions are all valid. I'm going to think about it.
Yeah.
But let's just get through this first, then we'll work it out, right?
We're still at the tail end of step one. So if you could leave step two's questions for a later date, I would appreciate that.
So by September 1959, Matos had solidified his decision to resign. And word must have got to Castro because in October, he ordered a member of the July 26 movement to go on television and accuse Matos of treason. This is even before he had resigned.
Right.
And word must have got out. I mean, I'm sure there wasn't a lot going on in Havana that Castro didn't hear about.
Yeah.
That he was meeting with people and they were talking about the fact that maybe we need to overthrow Castro because he seems to be sliding towards this communist path. We don't want communism. We have to overthrow the revolution. It's counter-revolutionary talk, right? When you're overthrowing the revolution.
Yes.
So on October 19th, 1959, Matos wrote a resignation letter where he said communist influence in the government had continued to grow. He had to alert the Cuban people to what was happening. He sent a second letter to Fidel, but also arranged for his letters to be covered by the local media to get into the hands of the local opposition groups, and he planned for his officers to resign en masse in support.
That's not just a principled resignation. That's a move. He's making a move. When you let everybody know when you want, I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's more than just his principles involved when you make it like that. In my humble opinion.
And look, I believe that he did this in good faith. Like he genuinely didn't like the idea of Cuba becoming communist for whatever reason. And, he was determined to do his best to stop it and to basically change the course of the revolution.
But would it be fair to say at this point in time, as far as we know, and it's there's a chance we don't know. I mean, was Cuba becoming communist, or was it that his interpretation, based on his own beliefs or whatever? I mean, to me, it sounds like if you and I are arguing it was becoming communist, it sounds like we're giving our opinions. What does he have besides something like the agrarian reform to back him up? Because have you ever heard of a smooth revolution? It normally doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, I think the agrarian reform was probably the kicker, right? I mean, that was the main thing that was going on here is breaking up the land holdings of the biggest, richest landholders.
Yeah.
So I do believe that was probably his primary concern. I mean, Raoul and Che were definitely, at this stage, Marxists.
Hmm.
Fidel, I don't think so. I think Fidel was still trying to walk a middle path at this stage. Because he, listen, like, when you're 90 miles off the coast of the United States and you've got a country that's poor, illiterate, no resources, you don't want to, you want to be able to do business with the country next door. By 1959, they knew that the United States wasn't doing business with the Warsaw Pact bloc, right? They're not doing
Right.
business with the Soviet bloc. So he's not a dummy. So he knows that if he pisses off the United States, he's not going to be able to do business with the United States, and they're going to try and attack him, right? He knows
Yeah.
that already. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. So I do think he was, very rational guy. He's going, okay, listen, maybe we can make this work, where we work with all sides, and I don't have to pick a side, right? I can just walk the middle path.
If you can hear me, you froze.
But I think that Matos probably saw the writing on the wall and, realized that they were becoming a little bit too, even if Fidel wasn't going to declare them as being socialists or communists, the policies that were being put into place were too communist for his liking. So anyway, 2 days later, Castro sent Camilo Cienfuegos to arrest Matos.
Yow.
Now, these two guys were good friends. They'd fought in the revolution together. Cienfuegos had apparently tried to talk Fidel out of it, but Fidel believed that the revolution was too young to handle any counter-revolutionary activities.
Right.
Cienfuegos apparently tried to talk Fidel out of it, but Fidel believed that the revolution was too young, too immature to handle any counter-revolutionary activities. So Cienfuegos went, arrested Matos and some of his staff, and they were transported to Havana to stand trial.
Damn.
This is a big deal. Revolution's year old, not even, and one of the senior commanders is being arrested.